Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Nathan was sitting there quietly in front of his computer when a message popped up in the corner of the screen. It was from her. Heather. The name already sounded way too familiar. He took a deep breath before clicking. What he read wasn't just a casual chat with a stranger online. It was an unfiltered confession. A dive into desires, lies, and secrets that had roots much closer than she could ever imagine. 2 weeks earlier, driven by the strange feeling that he was being deceived in his own marriage, Nathan had created a fake profile on a dating site for extramarital affairs. Something inside him said there was more behind Lauren's distance than simple exhaustion. She no longer looked at him the same way. She laughed at messages he never got to see. She dressed up more than necessary for short outings. And there were always new excuses for everything. A last-minute class. A friend who needed to talk. A coffee with women he'd never heard of. At first, he thought about asking her directly. But remembering the empty answers she usually gave, he gave up. He wanted proof. He wanted the truth straight from whoever was behind it. That's when he invented Ryan. He picked a common name, grabbed a random stock photo, and wrote a brief profile. He said he was a married man, discreet, looking for someone who understood the burden of keeping up appearances while desire screamed for freedom. In less than 2 days, Heather showed up. Her first message was direct, no beating around the bush. If this is just talk, don't waste my time. I like men who know what they want. Nathan smirked bitterly. The woman he was messaging didn't seem to hide at all. On the contrary, she spoke openly about her adventures, about the boredom of marriage, and the thrill of living on the edge. When he saw the second photo she sent, taken from behind, in front of a mirror, Nathan's heart froze. He knew that body. That small tattoo at the base of her neck. It was Lauren. Every piece of the truth fell on him like an avalanche. Heather wasn't a stranger. She was his wife. The woman he shared a life with, a home, memories. And now she was giving herself entirely to a man who, without knowing, was actually him. Nathan could have ended it all right there. He could have sent a single message, revealed his identity, and shut down the game. But that wasn't what he wanted. He needed to see how far she would go. He had to know who he was really married to. From that moment on, he dove headfirst into the character. Ryan became convincing. Intelligent. Provocative. Someone who listened and prodded. And Lauren, or rather, Heather, gave herself away more and more. She wrote long texts about her past hookups, about the places she liked to visit, about the men she'd been with. She described everything in great detail, from the disguises she used to sneak out of the house to the alibis she invented. She said her husband never noticed anything. That he was oblivious. That he preferred to ignore reality so he wouldn't have to face the fact she'd already left him emotionally. Nathan read every line like he was watching a slow, unstoppable fall. Sometimes he had to step away from the screen just to breathe. Other times, he felt like smashing everything around him. But he didn't. He chose silence. He saved every message, printed out the chats, stored photos in hidden folders. And behind every reply he wrote as Ryan was a growing pain, mixed with a sense of justice that got stronger with each new revelation. When Heather suggested meeting up, Nathan knew they'd reached a point of no return. She said she'd soon have a free morning, that her husband would be traveling for work, and that Ryan could come over to her house if he wanted. Nathan agreed. He said he'd be there. He looked at the screen with a mix of disgust and disbelief. The man she was eager to cheat on her husband with, was her husband. This woman who slept next to him every night, smelling of shampoo and promises, spent her days plotting lies, laughing with lovers, and sharing secrets with a stranger who had known the truth all along. Nathan stayed awake all night planning. There was no room left for doubt. Her disguise had an expiration date, and that date was about to arrive. Nathan left the house that morning with measured steps. He dressed like someone really going on a work trip, just like he'd told Lauren. He packed a small suitcase in the trunk, simple clothes, a laptop, just enough to keep up appearances. When he said goodbye, he held her gaze a bit longer than usual. He wanted to memorize that fake face wishing him safe travels, even though he knew exactly what would happen once the door closed. He drove to a car rental place and picked up the car he'd reserved days before. A silver sedan, discreet, nothing that would stand out. He left his own car in the rental parking lot and headed back to the neighborhood where they lived. Each street he passed reminded him of the last 2 weeks, the messages with Heather, the photos she sent, the blatant descriptions of secret meetups, cheap motels, made-up excuses, and, most of all, the ease with which she described her betrayals like her husband was a blind fool. When he turned onto his own street, Nathan felt his body get lighter. It wasn't peace. It was resolve. He parked right in front of the house where he'd built a family. He looked at the facade for a few seconds. He knew she was inside, getting ready, thinking she was about to receive a new, maybe more exciting lover, more attentive than the real husband she'd been ignoring for so long. He grabbed his phone and typed a short message, "I'm out front." Less than 30 seconds later, she replied, "Come in, I'll leave the door open." Nathan saw the bedroom curtain move slightly. She had peeked out. She probably saw the parked car, but since it was different, she suspected nothing. The plan went exactly as he'd pictured. With firm steps, he got out of the car, walked through the gate, and pushed open the front door, which was already ajar. The living room was bright, the sofa neatly arranged, and there was a light fragrance in the air, the same perfume she only used on special occasions. Lauren was standing with her back turned, beside a shelf, fixing her hair with one hand, her phone in the other. When she heard the door open, she turned around smiling, eyes already full of anticipation. But seeing who had just walked in, she froze. The smile vanished in an instant. Her body pulled back slightly, like she'd been punched in the chest. Her mouth fell open, but no words came out. The man she expected was Ryan. But the one standing there was her husband. Nathan didn't say a word. He slowly closed the door, watching her reaction with a look that held everything he'd endured in silence. The backpack on his shoulder felt heavier now. Lauren took a step back and mumbled his name, like she needed to confirm it was real. He walked over to the sofa, took off the backpack, and set it on the coffee table. Unzipping it slowly, he pulled out a thick envelope. "Sit down," he said calmly, like he was inviting her to witness her own downfall. She obeyed without protest. Her legs looked weak. Nathan started laying papers on the table one by one, printouts of his chats with Heather, images, entire messages, including the ones she'd sent the night before, where she said she wanted to try new things, that her husband was too predictable, and that Ryan seemed more of a man than he ever was. Lauren tried to look away from the printed words, but he insisted she look. He wanted her to face everything she had said when she thought she was safe behind anonymity. "Do you know who Ryan is?" he asked in a low, piercing voice. She swallowed hard, started shaking her head, stammering incoherent phrases. Nathan opened another envelope, this time the private investigator's report. He placed long-range photos on the table, her hugging other men, going into motel rooms, leaving with different clothes, kissing people inside cars. It was all documented. Lauren put her hand over her mouth. Tears filled her eyes, but none fell. It was like her body was still trying to grasp the depth of what was happening. "You wrote all of this thinking it was a stranger. You sent these photos thinking you were fooling someone. But the only one fooled here was you." She tried explaining. Said it all started as a joke, that she never thought it would go that far. Her voice trembled, words stumbling over each other. She promised there was no real emotion behind it, that it was just a distraction, that the marriage could still be fixed. Nathan wasn't moved. He told her the divorce was already underway. That the vacation savings were used as a down payment on a new place. That his mind was made up. I'm going to tell your family everything. You have the right to defend yourself, but not to hide the truth. Lauren got up unsteadily and ran to the bathroom. The sound of her throwing up echoed through the house, a visceral reaction to the guilt that finally hit her full force. Nathan, still silent, gathered the papers, put them back in his backpack, and walked down the stairs calmly. Before leaving, he stopped in the doorway and looked back one last time. The woman left behind was no longer the wife he'd known. She was the living proof of what lying does to someone who indulges in it, thinking they'd never be discovered. And she was, in the most brutal way possible. Lauren spent the next few days like a shadow of who she once was. The woman who used to walk confidently around the house, talk loudly on the phone, and smile self-assuredly in the mirror now walked around barefoot, aimless, looking worn out, wrapped in silence. Nathan had already left, and with him went the structure that held everything together. The sofa where they used to sit now felt too big. The bed was cold. The mirror was unsettling. The messages she used to send so eagerly, full of codes and desires, were gone. Her phone went silent. One by one, the men she'd been flirting with blocked her, vanished, deleted every trace. The fantasy collapsed. Meanwhile, Nathan settled into a new routine. He got up early, made his own coffee, read old newspapers he kept around, and slowly rediscovered the value of having peace. He spent hours organizing his documents, renewing ideas, and checking out properties with a mindset that he wasn't just looking for a place to sleep, but somewhere that wouldn't have lies hanging on the walls. He didn't let himself dwell on Lauren's words. Instead, he used that time to remember who he'd been before his identity got drowned out by someone else's excuses. While she was trying to explain to her friends what even she didn't understand, he moved forward. Among the many messages he got after everything was exposed, one stood out in an unexpected way. It was from Claire, the wife of one of the men mentioned in the detective's report. She found out everything because of Nathan's reveal. Her message simply said, "I don't know who you are, but thank you for setting me free." It was short, direct, and deeply honest. He looked at those words with a mix of relief and sadness. In a strange way, the pain he'd gone through had had an impact beyond his own story. And that gave it a hint of meaning in what felt like pure destruction. Lauren, now isolated, tried to rebuild ties with people who once cheered her on in those secret chats. She looked for Tracy, one of her oldest friends, the one who'd encouraged her to play around on that relationship site, saying, "Modern marriages need adventure." But even Tracy didn't want to get involved. She said everyone has to deal with their own choices and that she couldn't do anything for Lauren now. Tracy's coldness hit harder than any angry outburst. It proved that when everything falls apart, you're left with the echo of your bad decisions. She tried to reach out. Sent messages. Asked for a meeting. Lauren wanted any scrap of conversation with Nathan, using unknown numbers, alternate emails, even a handwritten note delivered by a courier. She wrote that she still loved him, that she was lost, that she'd do anything to have him back. He read it, took a deep breath, and calmly tore it up, like closing a letter from someone who no longer had any power to disturb his peace. One afternoon, he got a call he didn't expect. It was the lawyer handling the separation. Lauren had tried to challenge some of the terms, saying she felt emotionally harmed. Nathan simply let the paperwork proceed as it was, with everything detailed, proof attached, dates documented. He didn't want a war. He wanted distance. One day, leaving the bakery, he ran into an old neighbor. An older man who used to see him walking around with Lauren back in the early days of their marriage. He called Nathan by name and said, with a sincere look in his eyes, "You seem lighter. More sure of yourself. I never really understood what went on, but whatever it was, you did the right thing." Nathan thanked him, shook his hand, and walked away. That phrase echoed in his mind for hours. He didn't need anyone else's approval, but realizing other people could see the renewal he was living gave him a quiet sense of validation. With Lauren gone, the house where everything started now had closed gates, windows left open, and not a single sound inside. She couldn't sleep in her own bedroom anymore. The memories haunted her. The sofa became her bed. The kitchen was where she cried in secret. Her routine became punishment. She tried seeking advice in videos, self-help books, support groups. None of them taught her how to rebuild something when the rubble was her own doing. Meanwhile, Nathan reconnected with old friends he'd lost touch with. One of them, Logan, invited him to a small get-together. Nathan hesitated, then agreed. He needed a change of scene. That's where he met Brooke. A straightforward woman, easy to talk to, who listened more than she spoke. She didn't ask too many questions or try to fill the silence with quick-fix advice. She was just there, honest and unforced. He liked that. They went out for coffee another day, then had dinner together. There was no rush, no pressure. And with each small gesture, Brooke seemed to return the pieces Lauren had crushed without even noticing. Nathan never told the whole story right away. He just said he was rebuilding. Brooke respected that. The look in her eyes seemed to say time would take care of the rest. Before long, he found himself smiling again. Softly, but for real. For the first time in many months, he felt like he was living in the present, without any shadows looming behind him. Meanwhile, Lauren, alone in the old house, listened to the echoes of her own regret. Her phone, once packed with notifications, now buzzed only with auto-generated ads and calendar reminders. Nobody called. Nobody texted back. And every photo from the past turned into a knife. She replayed in her head the moment she saw Nathan standing in the doorway. The real Ryan. The end of the illusion. The final downfall. What she never imagined was that his absence wouldn't bring silence. It would bring echoes. Every wall in that house held a piece of what she'd lost. And what hurt the most wasn't being alone. It was knowing that, if time could rewind, she'd still choose to hide. She'd still gamble on the risk. And now, all she had left was to live with the one thing no one could take away from her, the living memory of what she had done. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.